Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a terrible homeowner association tricks me into joining by signing a fake document and building a fence on my property to steal my land for the good of the community. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. And the title story starts like this. Like some of you out there that live in an HOA and don't want to become a member, I get harassed a lot. It got to a point where I would pretend I was not home and attempt to block the numbers I knew were just a HOA. The only thing they ever seemed to do was nag me to join anyway, so blocking them was the obvious answer. When people know your number and where you live, it's literally impossible to keep them from bothering you. Now, you might wonder why I was so against joining this HOA in the first place, and the simple answer was that I didn't feel like there was any big purpose to them even existing. It would just be money out of my paycheck that I probably would not end up seeing as a benefit anywhere else. The more complicated answer was that I always kind of viewed my HOA as a little bit of a cult. Some people got really into it and hung onto every word of the president like he was sent down from heaven with all the answers to life. From other stories I've heard, I don't really think that this was a normal thing. Sadly, it also meant just more people trying to get me to join just because the president was telling them to. Fast forward a little bit in time and I hear a noise and go outside of my home. The sight that awaited me is that the HOA members put what I can only describe as a fence on my property. It was almost like a cage because it was three-sided. Unlike anything I would call a normal fence, it also was not there to divide any property like every fence I've ever heard of. Instead, this thing was basically in the middle of my front yard, just hanging out. You can understand that I was a mixture of confusion and fury. I tried to shoo them off of my lawn, and while that worked, they came back quickly to finish whatever they were doing. I did not want to play this game, so I went right to the head of this operation himself. Me, do you know what your members are doing to my lawn? HOA president, oh yes, they were so nice to volunteer, so we didn't need to waste money hiring somebody. Me, they are destroying it. What made you think it was okay to build some weird fence on my property without so much as an ounce of permission? HOA president, they had permission. I told them they had consent to go on the property. Me, it's my property, it's my consent they need. HOA president, in the HOA guidelines, it states that the president can commission work to benefit the community on any member property. And I can also give others permission to carry out that work. If you lost a handbook, I can gladly give you another one. Me, I'm not an HOA member though. I told you 1000 times that I didn't want to be part of your weird little group. You cannot just decide I am. HOA president, I don't know what else to tell you about the matter. Your property is listed as a member and the perfect spot for us to start the community garden. Me, you're not going to take over my front yard. Take over one of your actual members' lands. The conversation wasn't going anywhere, and I read enough stories to know exactly what I should do next. I went and got a lawyer that specialized in HOA issues, and I told him right off the bat what they were doing and that I had never even signed up for the HOA. He told me if that was the case, then it should be open and shut. He could force them to remove it quickly with no hassle. That was not what ended up happening though, because, well, if it did, I probably would not bother posting this story. Instead, he came back to me with documents from the HOA lawyer that showed I had signed to be a member. That was 100% my signature on the form, but I don't remember signing up at all. We started brainstorming what could have happened, and eventually it hit me. A few months ago, people were going door to door to ask for petition signatures. It was about increasing school funding, which I'm always for, so I signed. It turns out that the petition was fake and they had a paper underneath, so when I signed it, it bled through to the HOA agreement form. It was going to be harder of a fight now, since their paperwork looked legit from the outside. Still, I had some options and was gonna do everything I could to get them off my lawn. While I try to play fair, I live by a set of rules that basically says if the other person is trying to screw me over, I don't need to play nice. We knew they had a plan based entirely off of me attempting to prove their forms forced and tricked me. Instead, when it came time to speak in court, I threw them for a loop by going an entirely different direction. Me, I felt immense pressure and harassment to join the HOA for years. I have tried to block phone numbers or emails, but no matter what, they kept coming. It put such a strain on me mentally that I didn't think I could do anything else to make it stop. I never thought they would take over my lawn without even asking me first. If you're reading carefully, you might notice that I never said I actually signed the papers or joined the HOA. Sure, I alluded to it, but nothing I actually said was an outright lie. Even when I was shown the papers and asked about it, I just told them the truth. that it was indeed my signature on those forms and not forged. The HOA lawyers were scrambling to try and figure out what to do with this. They didn't think I would make this case about harassment and joining under duress. It even says in their own stupid rules that if it was done under those conditions, the paperwork is not valid. The judge sided with me and I was able to basically undo the fact that I signed the papers in the first place. While we were there though, we also had to talk about the fence on my property. The HOA was now claiming that if I was not a member anymore, they didn't have to remove it since they could not come on my property anymore. The judge was having none of that and told them that the fence placement was illegal to begin with, so removing it was probably the only way to stop them from getting sued further. I was gonna give them none of that courtesy anyway, and I had a lawsuit for the illegal fence ready to go as soon as it was declared illegal. And well, that went about as well for them as this case did, and I was graded $89,000. After all of that, the HOA and all their little cult members were furious at me. They spread rumors that I stole money out of starving children's mouths and wanted to see the entire community burn. I knew that their hate was coming from a one-sided story, but I didn't care enough to go around and attempt to correct them. I knew that they followed the HOA like a deity and it would be pointless. Instead, I was busy trying to figure out a nice way to spend my money. Also enjoying the fact that the HOA was not allowed to try and get me to join again in fear of me suing them again for all the harassment this time. And yeah, ripe stars, let's hope that crazy entitled HOA never messes with OP again. However, it seems like if the HOA notices that you fight back and you're not letting them bully you, they are actually scared themselves and back off eventually. Either way, if you like the HOA stories, please don't forget to leave a comment and maybe even like the video if you enjoy my content. Thank you so much. And the next one is a story from r/malicious compliance. This starts when my now wife and I decide to move in together and rent a house. We were in our early 20s and it was our first time renting and we had fairly low income, so our options were limited. Luckily, we found a place that was in a less desirable area but had recently had some basic renovations. We signed a lease and life went on. Our first 12 months went by with a rental inspection from the agent every 3 months or so, never got any feedback, and being new to renting, figured everything was okay. We had a couple of items that needed repairing in that time, so I met the landlord and got his details for organizing repairs. He seemed like a decent guy, probably early 40s, reasonably handy, and he did some repairs himself. The first year went by, the lease came to an end, and they increased the price and we signed on for another 12 months. But then it happened. About 2 months later, the agent came to inspect along with the landlord's wife. The wife turned her nose up at absolutely everything and made a number of insulting comments about our furniture when she thought I couldn't hear. We got an inspection report after that gave us a huge list of items to rectify and 2 weeks to do it, or else they would initiate proceedings to evict us. Naturally, after never hearing any feedback from any other inspections, we were simply shocked. The items were mostly minor nitpicks, with the worst things being to move our cats outdoors, clean the oven, and poison weeds on the path in the backyard. We were fine copying it on the chin and doing what they asked, except for the cats. Initially, when signing the lease, it said no pets, but we requested and got acceptance for our indoor-only cats. It was noted on the lease, but not on the copy I had. I was kicking myself for not having it in writing, and I knew I had no chance if they wanted to push the point. So then I called the landlord rather than talking through the agent. He explained that tenants in the other house they owned had been using it as a drug lab and the agents had never picked up on it. So then when they found out, his wife insisted on going along to our inspection, and hence why we got a bad report. I talked it out with him, and although he was very patronizing towards me, he agreed we could keep the cats inside as long as we kept everything clean and the next reports went fine. So we did as they asked, and they increased the inspections from once every 3 months to once a month, which is the minimum period they are allowed. We had a list of things to fix after every inspection. It made our life hell. We felt like intruders in our own home, we grew to hate living there, and it put a strain on our relationship. Luckily or unluckily, depending on how you look at it, my father passed away around that time, so I ended up with inheritance money from his super fund and the sale of his house. My wife and I used the inheritance as a deposit to buy a house of our own, sorted out a loan agreement, and found a place we liked. Now, this is where I finally got my chance to repay them for making us feel like indentured servants that only existed to vacuum carpets and scrub walls in our home. By some miracle of luck, I negotiated the settlement date for our new house to be 1 week before our lease was due to end. This meant that we shouldn't have to break contract and be stuck footing the bill while they found new tenants. Better yet, they sent me a letter saying our lease was due and included a new lease agreement with a large jump in rent. The letter said that we had to either sign the new lease and send it back to them by a date that was 2 weeks before end of lease, or consider the contract ended, move out by the end of the lease term, and hand over the keys. It said nothing about telling them that we didn't want to renew the lease, so I didn't. I did not want them booking open inspections and intrude further on our lives to show the place to new tenants and decide that they didn't deserve extra notice. The days ticked by, a couple weeks went past, and my wife and I were busy getting ready to move. I did not get contacted by the agent again until my phone rang 1 week after the new paperwork was due, literally the day before we were moving out. It was the agent, of course. They greeted me nicely and said it was just a reminder that we needed to sign the new lease and get it back to them. I told them, oh, we are not signing it. We bought a house and we are moving out tomorrow. The other end of the line went dead silent for a good few seconds while my face got stuck in a grin. The agent quietly asked why we hadn't told them, and I said the paperwork only said to let them know if we were extending the lease, nothing about moving out, so I assumed they knew. She said goodbye pretty quickly, and the panic in her voice was glorious. She was screwed and knew it. I wish I got to hear more of the fallout, but my wife and I moved out, cleaned the house over the remaining week, and I handed the keys over. They never booked any open inspections in that final week, so the house sat empty for a while, waiting on new tenants, and the landlords missed out on some rent payments. We also checked the listings and saw they advertised it at a lower price than what they were going to gauge us for. As a bonus, a couple days after the lease ended, the agent called me and said our contact stated that we had to have the carpets steam cleaned and they were going to take the cost from our bond. I told her we had them steam cleaned and she said we didn't. The carpet smelled like garbage. After me telling her again that we had, she demanded a copy of the receipt. I emailed it through and never heard from them again. I didn't mention that there was a cavity under the house and the couple of bags of rubbish I chucked under there as we were moving out because the bins were full. I guess the floor was not as airtight. And yeah, ripe stars, please let me know in the comments what you would have done if you would have been in this situation with these awful landlords. Either way, the next one is titled, My SO's Parents Are Awful. Back in March, his parents decided they wanted to come wait quarantine out at our apartment. For starters, they never asked. His mother called and told me that they were on their way and to prepare our spare bedroom for them. I was already apprehensive about them staying with us because his parents have always been extremely rude to me. They are overly critical of everything I say and do. They are massive control freaks who feel entitled to always be in charge. So then, right off the bat, things are miserable. They verbally abuse me daily, tell me what I can and cannot do in my own apartment, and are overall just the worst. Out of everything, the air conditioning caused the biggest debacle. Where I live, it has been 85 to 90 degrees almost every day. Fahrenheit, I guess. I normally keep my air on 70, but when they started complaining, I turned the air up to 75. That's already a little toasty for me, but I was willing to be a little hot to try to keep the peace. This was not good enough for them. They don't want the air on, period. They want the heat on. And they turn it on every single opportunity they get. I wake up in the middle of the night covered in sweat. I've told them to stop countless times, and yesterday I finally cracked. I put about 10 pieces of duct tape over the thermostat with a note attached that said, "Don't touch the thermostat while I'm at work." So then at 6 PM I walk into my apartment and I'm automatically hit by a hotter and more humid heat than it is outside. Duct tape and note have been torn off the thermostat and they have the heat on 98 effing degrees. I go into the guest room and say, why could you not follow the simple instruction of don't touch the thermostat? This is my home. I'm tired of you saying rude things to me. I'm tired of you treating me like a kid and creating your own rules for my apartment. You either need to be respectful towards me and learn to accept my boundaries or go back to your own house. His mother said, and I disdainfully quote, "You have no right to barge in here without knocking. That was not only an invasion of privacy, but you need to take the attitude out of your tone. I've dealt with much bigger witches than you before." She went on for 30 minutes and I just tuned her out. When she was done talking, I told her to get out. Now my boyfriend is angry with me because I couldn't just let them have their way. He wants me to call his mom and apologize, but I don't think I should have to. I may have been rude to her, but it was only because I've spent the past 2 months dealing with her abuse and trying to politely ask her to stop treating me that way. I got tired of politely asking someone to stop treating me like crap in my own home, in which I was letting them live in for free. I also got tired of my boyfriend refusing to defend me and allowing her to say and do whatever she wanted. I'm trying to understand their perspective, although it just does not seem reasonable to me. If Reddit determines that I'm the jerk here, I will call and apologize. And yeah, Ripe Stars, let us know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think that OP is the a-hole for wanting to throw out these entitled parents or not? I'm very curious about what you have to say. And a person on Reddit said, not the a-hole, and I would seriously reconsider a future with him if he's not willing to support you now. It would only be worse in the future when it comes to his parents. Comment 2, not the a-hole, why do you even stay with your boyfriend? He's clearly choosing his mother over you every single time. You should be kicking all 3 of them out. And now, guys, we have an update to the story in which OP says, alright guys, so my boyfriend and I just had a very long conversation. I admitted to him that I vented on Reddit and I screenshotted a bunch of comments for him to read. He was mostly silent for a while and got a little emotional. Eventually, he asked me if I showed him all these comments because I was planning on leaving him. I told him no, I was not gonna just dump him without giving him the chance to work through our issues if he was willing to. I explained to him that I understand his past trauma with his mother, but it doesn't make it okay for him to enable her to be abusive towards me. He agreed that he was in the wrong and he should have made a bigger effort to step in and defend me. He also apologized for asking me to call his mother and apologize. I told him that I was not gonna make him choose between me and his mother, but if we were gonna have a healthy relationship, he would have to start going to therapy and he would have to confront his mom about her behavior. I told him I would stand by him and support him as he did it, but it was something he would have to do on his own. I told him that we were setting some hard boundaries, and one of those boundaries would be that his parents are no longer allowed to stay with us ever. He agreed that was for the best and admitted he has been miserable these past 2 months too. He mentioned that cutting off his family might be what is the healthiest for his mental health and how that is something he would discuss with the psychiatrist when he goes. I told him that I was extremely hurt that not only was he willing to prioritize his mother over me, but he was willing to cause me pain to satiate her need for control. It bothered me a lot that he made me really feel like I was the a-hole, to the point that I made this post to try to gain perspective. After that, he told me he would call his mother and request that she apologize for treating me so poorly the past 2 months. Honestly, that's a really big step for him and I'm very proud of him for that. It shows me that he is willing to work on his issues. I do think seeing a professional might help him process these emotions better and develop healthier coping mechanisms. Overall, right now it seems like we are going to be okay relationship-wise as long as he's committed to actually following through with his promises.
The next one is titled, Neighbor Invites Herself In. Okay, so this happened a few months ago, but tonight is the first time my son has had a sleepover since this incident, and I felt the need to vent about this past situation. So my kid, who is 9, was close with the neighbor's boys next door, and we live in apartments. I invited the 2 of them to spend the night with my son, who is an only child. Since they live next door, they did not really have to come over or get dropped off. We live 15 feet apart, so anyways they are all playing outside with another boy from the apartments who's in my son's class at school. They have played together outside before this 2 or 3 times and I had seen him around. So it is getting dark and I go out to collect them and reel them in. When, out of nowhere, a man approaches me and sticks his hand out, says he's this kid's dad. Then he nudges his son forward and says, "Go ahead, ask her, buddy." The kid says, "Can I spend the night too?" I am caught totally off guard. I say, "Sorry buddy, but we made plans for Aunt E to spend the night tonight and I don't think we have room for 4 kids in his room, but you can totally spend the night another time." Tears well up in his eyes and he cannot even speak. The dad just looks at me and walks away. It hits me, I just broke this kid's heart. I feel like crap. The kids spent the night and everyone has a great time. I ask my son to get this other kid's dad's number the next day and text saying I'm so sorry I hurt his feelings and he is invited to spend the night on Friday. The day comes and I communicate with the dad about what time, what does he like for dinner, all that. We agree on 7 PM and I'll have pizza ready. So he walks the kid over and out of nowhere says, "Hey, were you the one who put a note on my car?" I have no idea what he's talking about, but he seems annoyed. I say no, so we go inside and the kid says he already ate. He is not hungry because dad took him to McDonald's. Awesome, total waste of money on the pizzas. Okay, so the kid is a bit loud, but everything is okay until it is not. I tell them bedtime is 11 and I find that quite generous considering they are 8 at the time, an hour after bedtime passes and they are still up. I go in and tell them cut it out. I go to bed around 1 and check in and my son is asleep and the other boy has the TV on YouTube playing some Click at 3 AM ghost stuff. I take the remote and say go to bed. Around 3 I wake up to a bang and go in there. This kid had crawled on a rolly chair and knocked it over. I'm like, what are you doing? Go to bed. Every hour I am woken up by stomping or a bang and find him in various states of pulling things out of the closet and so on, so the next morning I text the dad and say it went okay, could have been better, but they are up and he is walking home now. So the dad shows up almost immediately and knocks on the door. Why? I said the kid was walking home. He comes inside with a lit cigarette and I tell him, "Oh, you cannot smoke in here." He glares at me and just stands in my house. I get the kid and they leave without a word. F that guy and the horse he rode in on.
And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.